Greetings. By virtue of your presence watching this video today, I want you to know that we consider you to be an extended member of our family at Unity in Linwood. We believe that you are an individualized expression of that one creative impetus which stands behind all life. And as such, we celebrate the uniqueness which you are, and we celebrate our unity with you. We are glad you're with us.
Every service has an ambassador. This person's role is to assist you in your exploration and discovery of a divine evolving idea called Unity in Linwood. If you have a question about who we are, about what we believe, about what we teach, about what we do, you are welcome to engage this noble soul in conversation that you might have a face to put with a name. Her name is Nan Allen. He is among my greatest teachers. He is among my dearest friends. He is the chair of UIL's Interfaith at UIL program, here to extend an invitation to you. Would you welcome Rabbi Ted Falcon, please?
Woo! So this shirt, I gotta give credit because Gloria and Judy actually did this for me yesterday. I knew there was tie-dyeing, and I brought the shirt, but I didn't know was it's really an extensive process. And I had a program to lead, and they were kind enough to do this. Awesome. I may never take it off. So, what I wanted to say was that on the 25th of August, I get to share with you the other 2/3 of the Interfaith Amigos. You've been very kind to put up with just 1/3 of us. But with an imam and a pastor, we've been working together for almost 16 years. And we've kind of bumbled into like a model that we never saw before. I imagine that you're familiar with that in this place. And it would be really a deep pleasure for me to be able to share my deep friends and the kind of teaching that we've been taking across the country. We've been to Japan 3 times. We've been to Israel, Palestine a couple times. We've just met hundreds and hundreds of fascinating people at universities and colleges and churches and synagogues and cultural centers of the mosque community, the Sikh community. So that's the 25th. I'm going to be speaking actually on the 27th, and I'm speaking on what's a rabbi doing at Unity in Linwood. And I just want to say one thing more. I mean, part of what a rabbi's doing at Unity in Linwood is that this rabbi no longer fit in a place that was monolithic, that kind of built in an exclusivity, and in one way or another proclaimed itself better than other teachings. This rabbi belongs in a pluralistic environment. And lo and behold, like this is the 6th year that we're going to be doing our high holidays here. And just naturally, over these years, a deepening friendship and respect has just kind of a mutuality of love has unfolded that is such a tremendous gift. So what I want to say is we have the Jewish High Holy Days coming up in the fall. And one of the things we bring to each other is, okay, what are the spiritual teachings in your tradition that can help me awaken? What are the spiritual teachings that lead us to that unitive place, that place of oneness, that place that we seek to awaken the peace that needs to be, and the love that's yearning to be expressed? So I just wanted to say it would be delightful to share High Holy Days with you. We won't make fun of you except when you mispronounce the Hebrew. But this is just a wonderful and unique place of sharing, and I'm grateful to be here.
It was a group of counterculturalists who retreated to a now famous farm to discover the truths of nature. Thank God. And to pursue lives removed from what they called mindless materialism, the meaningless work, and the corrupt values of mainstream society, a place where even women could expand beyond their typical spheres of activity. Woodstock, you say? No. This text describes a utopian experiment called Brook Farm to include transcendentalists Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne, Margaret Fuller. You see, this text describes a utopian experiment dated to the 1840s. So how about this one? A group of counterculturalists, advocates of free love, blasted what they considered to be the hypocrisy of contemporary marriage and urged men and women alike to give their emotional and physical urges free rein. These reformers argued that passions are essentially good and that any repression can lead to physical illness, psychic dissatisfaction. I see some of you can relate to that one. They argued that individuals were entitled, if not obliged, to pursue their passions to their natural ends. In one famous wedding vow we find, and I paraphrase, "I resign no right of my soul. The only fidelity pledged is to the deepest love of my heart, and should that love lead to another, I will follow." Woodstock, you say. No, this text includes a marriage vow from Mary Gove to Thomas Lowe Nichols, who became the most prominent spokespeople of the free love movement. This philosophy dates to 1848. 1848. So how about this? A group of counterculturalists arose to condemn what they considered to be the emptiness, both moral and cultural, of society. Some fled to Europe, where they claimed to find a less materialistic world, a less intellectually sterile existence, while others remained and they drank and they smoked and they snorted their way into what they believed was a more vital existence. Now I hear you thinking Woodstock. But I say no, that text describes 1920s America. So how about this? A group of counterculturalists arose. A group larger than any prior generation in the history of the United States. A group of American youth who broke profoundly with almost every value their parents held dear, who challenged almost every static reality of American life, from its corrupt politics to its antiquated gender roles to its vicious racism. Now that's Woodstock, you say. And I say, yes, that describes Woodstock. John Roberts and Joel Rosenman placed a classified ad in both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and I quote, "Young men with unlimited capital looking for interesting, legitimate investment opportunities and business propositions," end quote. Well, from the thousands of responses, they met Kornfeld and Lang, who proposed a recording studio tucked into the woods in a town called... Thank you. And it made good sense. After all, by the late 50s, musicians including Bob Dylan and Tim Hardin, Van Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin were moving to the area. So the four met in February of '69 and planned a concert to fund the studio. To this day, the four argue about just whose idea that was. The first big break came with the signing of the Jefferson airplane for the stunning figure of $12,000. Creedence Clearwater Revival signed for $11,500. The Who came on board for $12,500. After being banned from their original site on July 15th, you understand that was about a month before the event. After being banned from their site, the gentlemen secured Max Yasker's dairy farm. New contracts had to be created, new permits acquired, a stage, a performer's pavilion, a children's playground, parking lots, concession stands. All were finished just in time for the event, while the ticket booths and the gates were not. So 2 days before the fair was to begin, there were already 50,000 people camping near the stage, including our own Danielle Kelly, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true, Danielle? Wow. Many of whom had walked right through the gaps in the fence where the gates would have been. And from that point, the organizers necessarily declared the event to be no charge. And as this news spread, an estimated 1 million additional people turned toward Bethel. Traffic was so heavy that the organizers were forced to hire helicopters to transport performers from the hotel to the stage. The police turned thousands away. But remarkably, the music began Friday afternoon. It was 5:07 p.m. Richie Valens took the stage. He was followed by Sweetwater and Joan Baez and other folk singers. Entire institutions, even those founded on lofty ideals, were targets of this 1960s counterculturalism. It was argued that the government was not so much for the people as it was for dishonest, self-seeking politicians and lobbyists. That churches were not so much communities of spiritual learning as they were repositories of self-righteousness. That schools were not so much vehicles for authentic education as they were middlemen whose only role was to generate mindless puppets for a larger corporate machine. That marriage was not so much an institution of love as it was a prison perpetuated by the gravity of social convention. It was from the feminine mystique that I quote, "Each suburban housewife struggles with it alone as she made the beds, shopped for groceries, matched slipcover material, ate peanut butter sandwiches with her children, chauffeured Cub Scouts, lay beside her husband at night. She was afraid to ask, even of herself, the silent question, is this all? Is this all?" And for her, the resounding answer from this 1960s countercultural movement was no. No. This is not all. And as the black man used segregated facilities, lived in a segregated neighborhood, walked his children to a segregated school, all with the understanding that he would die 7 years earlier than his white counterpart, perhaps he was afraid to ask even of himself the same question, is this all? And the resounding answer came from this 1960s counterculturalism. And it said, no. No. This is not all. And the baby boom counterculture gave speed to the work. that included Brown versus the Board of Education in 54, Rosa Parks in 55, the bus boycott in 56, through the freedom rides of 61, the rise of Malcolm X in 62, and the famous March on Washington in 1963. By the time Jimi Hendrix finished his set on Monday morning, the crowd had declined to about 25,000 people. The last bedraggled fans sloshed out of Max Yasker's dairy fields this week, 47 years ago. Although sources reported at least 2 births at Woodstock, no one to my knowledge has stepped forward as a Woodstock baby. At the same time, countless people claim to have been conceived during Woodstock. There were no reported incidents of violence among the 500,000. That is, if you're willing to overlook Abby Hoffman, who rushed the stage and grabbed the microphone before Pete Townsend of The Who shouted for him to get off the stage and hit him with his guitar neck. Some argue that it was a great party. Others argue that it was a fitting end to an era of naivete. Still others argue that the counterculture of the 1960s was less revolutionary than cyclical, just another on a rung, on a spiral that periodically revived similar themes and pursued similar alternatives. And I say, you know what? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? For I have to believe that it's from such a counterculture spiraling ever upward that women continue to transcend their roles as wives and mothers and to pursue their rightful places, thank God, within every corner of society and politic. It's about time. And I have to believe that it's from such a counterculture spiraling ever upward that gays and lesbians continue to transcend those hiding places necessitated by fear and ignorance, those stonewall ends, if you will, to stand for a possibility in which one's gender nor orientation are associated with one's value. I have to believe that it's from such a counterculture spiraling ever upward that men and women of color continue to transcend the countless isms of mediocre minds, to stand forth as full partners in the continuing formation of a nation, not only in its fragmented history, but in its unified future. Whether in Selma, Alabama, or Ferguson, Missouri, or Charlottesville, Virginia. So when we ask the obvious question, what can I do? I would answer that you can start by attending a church in which religious history and spiritual practice are vehicles which would unite people through heightened understanding, not divide people through bloated self-righteousness. That's where you can start. When we speak of this 1960s counterculture, we speak of less than 10% of the young American people. We speak of the vast minority, but you know what? It's always less than 10%. It's always less than 10%. It's always less than 10 that initiate any sweeping change. It's always a daring few who heed that thinker who thinks higher, that knower that knows deeper, that seer within you that sees further. Fillmore understood this, and I quote, "You are here for a purpose. That purpose is never fulfilled, nor are you fulfilling the law of your being by going over day after day the petty round of human existence. You have been cast in a larger mold than this." End quote. Bless you. And if Fillmore's words fail to satisfy, let's close with what I believe is a very similar message extended by the Apple Corporation. And it reads as follows: "Here's to the crazy ones the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or vilify them, but the one thing you cannot ever do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward, and while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are always the ones who do.
Thanks again for joining us. Please visit unityinlinwood.org for a preview of all upcoming classes, services, and events, and for an opportunity to make a gift to our community should you so choose. Thank you.